Oh my goodness, I can say Happy New Year. Happy New Year?
Happy New Year! Well, not
Yeah,
yet.
no, but by the time this comes out, Happy New Year, everybody. I
Happy
hope
New
you
Year!
had a wonderful New Year. We had a great New Year. How was your New Year? Was it good? I'm asking you.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, yeah, it's fantastic. Absolutely
Yeah, great
fantastic.
New Year. So Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you are all well and enjoying the first few days of going back to work.
2025?
2025. Welcome to episode 2 of our podcast.
26 to life, where after 26 years of friendship, we have done longer than a life sentence.
So now we're going to make a podcast together. Well, we already started. You guys actually listened to our first episode, and it may not seem like a lot, but I think in total, when we're recording this, we've got over 30 people who've listened to it. So thank you to each and every one of you. It means the world. Incredible. Before we get started, I just want to say that this podcast involves discussions around difficult topics. We are today looking at, you have to tell them what we're looking at, I don't know.
Death, suicide, abuse of the elderly.
So please listen to this podcast when you are feeling strong enough and not feeling super vulnerable, and also consider very carefully if you listen to this around children under the age of 12. What you got for me today?
So my story is about a man called Harold Shipman. He's quite infamous in England.
Okay.
I think it'll be quite obvious by the end why. Hopefully. Okay. But the story starts with...
I've heard of this name. Disclaimer, I've heard of this name. Cannot remember what he did.
Okay, perfect. So the story starts with a woman called Kathleen Grundy. She was 81 years old, and she was a former mayoress of Hyde, which is where she lives. Hyde is like 7 miles outside of Manchester. It's a small town, very like working class town in 1998, which is when this story starts. Everyone would help everyone knows everyone, you know, give your neighbour a bag of sugar kind of town, you know?
1998, so 3 years after we were born. So not that long ago.
Not that long ago, because we're super babies.
Young.
So young.
Young.
So young and youthful.
Youthful, yeah. Yeah.
So true. We both had completely different reactions to that. I was like, so youthful and cute, and you were like Botox. Where do I need to pull back?
Oh God.
Oh no, beautiful. So Kathleen Grundy was well known. She was a popular gal. She was going out and having luncheons, and this is exactly where she was supposed to be. At 81.
Wild.
She was out. She was supposed to be helping at the luncheon as well. So she was like helped organise them and everything like that. She was like a social gal.
Okay, question.
Go on.
What's the difference between a lunch and a luncheon?
A lunch, I think, is just supposed to be like, a couple of people. Well, I think the luncheon is more of a function. Like it's like a bigger thing with more people. Whereas a lunch is just like, 1-to-1.
It's a lunch function. It's a luncheon.
So that's actually where she was supposed to be on the 24th of June in 1998. She didn't show up, so a few of her friends, because this is what you want when you're 81, you're living alone. You want your friends to come and check on you when you don't show up to your luncheon.
Yeah, she could have fallen, she could have hurt herself, something could have happened.
Exactly. And they went to her house, found her dead on the sofa.
Aww.
Yeah. I know, poor Kathleen. She was 81 years old.
Okay, so she was...
she was... it probably wasn't young. Yeah, exactly. Could probably have passed quite naturally. And so they called the doctor. The doctor was a man called Harold Shipman. So Shipman said he'd seen her alive earlier that day, and she was perfectly well. And he happened to be the last one to have seen her alive. But there was nothing remarkable about her death. Although she was fit and healthy, the doctor wrote pretty much old age on her death certificate, and nobody really had reason to question it because she was 81.
Yeah.
It's old age. Like, people do just die of old age,
Yeah.
And then loads of people went to her funeral. Like, it was a huge thing because everybody loved her. Like I said, very popular. And then 2 weeks after her funeral, her daughter, who happened to be a solicitor, she received a fax from her mother's solicitor with the will. And in the will, it was typed terribly. And this is a lady who was a former mayoress. So, she's probably got a nice typewriter. She probably has nice paper. Back in 1998, people like these ladies are going to luncheons. They probably care about these kinds of things,
Yeah.
And so,
but also, would it even have been her typing it? Like, surely with a will, if it's like, you've got you go through a law firm and stuff, no?
Yeah, that's a good idea. It's a good shout.
I know
actually.
you don't have to. I know you can write your own will and then somebody else can witness it. But I would think that if it's like leaving your house to your daughter, you'd go to a lawyer. Be something.
Yeah. Well, it's just that was something that her daughter had specifically noted. So it perhaps she did. It was just something that felt a bit off to her. She realised this didn't seem like something that her mum would have written.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Whether it was with a lawyer or whether it was herself, she would have thought it would have been nicely typed. So on this will, it states, I give all my estate money and house to my doctor. My family are not in need, and I want to reward him for all of the care he has given me and to the people of Hyde. My doctor is Dr. H. Shipman, which is the man that happened to have been the last person to see her alive, and the person that had been treating her, who signed her death certificate as old age, and not only treated her, but treated hundreds of people in the area.
The doctor killed her.
So, excuse me?
The doctor killed her.
This isn't that kind of thing.
Am I not meant to be solving it?
No.
Okay, guys, and that's a wrap. We'll see you next week.
Also, considering that I did tell you that this episode was about Harold Shipman, I don't really think that you had to do much to learn that maybe he was a murderer. But anyway,
he's a bad egg.
Spoiler alert, it was Harold, okay? God damn it. Anyway, back in 1998, nobody believed that she would have changed her will, nor that she would have written it on such an awful typewriter. So both style and content were unbelievable. And, that's probably true to...
doctor. Weird.
Yeah, very weird. And, I mean, at that point, he was like the only person to have benefited from this will and was also the last person to see her alive. So it was all just like, starting to add up a little bit weird. But it had two witnesses on there. So they went and her daughter and her daughter's husband went over to these witnesses and said, do you remember signing this will for my mother, however many weeks ago? And they said, yes, we remember signing this will for your mum. It was in the doctor's surgery. It was however many weeks ago.
Sorry.
And
who said that? The doctor or the doctor's like...
The witnesses. The two witnesses to the will.
Oh.
So then it was like, okay, wait a minute. This was legit. This is... Okay, wait a minute. So then it all, again, kicked off a little bit. People were like, oh, didn't really know what to believe. But the daughter still didn't believe. She knew this wasn't right. This wasn't her mum. So she got in touch with the police almost immediately and said, this is a suspicious death, suspicious will. I really want you to look into it. So in July 1998, a man called Bernard Postles was made the head of this investigation.
Name.
Bernard, I know. Bernard?
I was going to go with the Postles bit. Do you remember that book called Not Now, Bernard?
I loved that book. That was actually my older sister's favourite book, and he got eaten by a monster at the end.
Yeah.
She wanted to call her child Bernard, I'm pretty sure. Bernard Postles.
Go on. Bernard Possells, go on.
He shared the suspicions of the family almost immediately. He was like, okay, well,
Obviously.
everyone knows everyone in this town. Like I said, it's a small town. And he believed that this wasn't quite right. So he wanted to discover the cause of death, obviously, because he thought maybe if we discover the actual cause of death, we confirm that she actually died of old age. Perhaps that could give us some more information. So they exhumed the body, which was the first time that Greater Manchester had ever carried out an exhumation. The police of Greater Manchester had ever exhumed a body from the grave.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When someone dies of old age,
Yeah.
surely there is still something though. Like it must still be like one organ failed, or do you know what I mean?
Well,
You don't just open the body and see, oh, it's all a bit old.
Well, that's the thing, is that if well, I mean, I don't think they did they opened the body because the doctor just signed off, said old age.
I'm just thinking.
But I guess if she didn't have any past problems, they said that she was generally healthy.
You'd be looking for like a heart attack or lung failure
or a stroke
or liver failure
or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, I guess so. But then perhaps, yeah, exactly. So something more specific. So they did it in around 4 or 5 in the morning because they didn't want to cause alarm. They didn't want it to be like a big deal in town. And it was going to take around 2 weeks for the forensic results to come back. So they didn't address Shipman. They didn't really give out too much information. They just they didn't want to cause a frenzy, so they kept things quite quiet. However, the news did break, obviously, as news does in small towns, and people were adamant he did nothing wrong. So people were 100% on the side of Harold Shipman. There was no question about it. People wouldn't dare say that Harold Shipman could possibly have anything to do with this. He worked in his own practice in town centre. He had 3,000 patients on his list. That's a huge amount of patients. And he was one of the most popular GPs in Hyde. There was a year wait to get onto this list. So people were waiting, they were signing up, and they knew that they wanted to be a patient of Harold Shipman. And so with all of those people kind of backing him, all those people had direct experience interacting with Harold Shipman, and they said themselves that he never would have done anything like this. Even reporters for the Manchester Evening News didn't believe it, and it wasn't reported as a murder investigation. It really was just an inquiry into Kathleen Grundy's death. But people would, as the reporters were reporting on it, people would question and call the report news. What would you call that? Where all of the news people are? The offices, I guess.
Yeah, the newspapers.
Yeah, they would actively call up and say, why are you doing this? Why are you smearing his name? Why would you write such things about Harold Shipman? You're tarnishing everything that he's done. He's a respected GP. But some of the direct quotes from people who would be talking about Harold Shipman, they said that he always made you feel important, he's very well read, and he always had your best interests at heart. He would come and check in on patients on a regular basis. He would do house calls and he would just pop in. There was someone who said that she had her baby in the hospital and he just came to check in on them after she gave birth. Like, not because he needed anything. No. He was just, he wasn't the one that delivered the baby. He just wanted to check in. He just popped by and to see how they're doing. There was no suspicions whatsoever. You would go into his office around that time and his walls of his office were plastered with cards of people saying, we believe in you and we love you, and just general support for him as a person. However, 3 months prior, many people didn't realise that there had been another investigation that had been opened on him.
Oh, no. How?
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah,
okay.
3 months before.
I'll let you get to it.
Yeah. I mean, I had the same questions. Don't worry. So, Linda Reynolds, she was a GP basically across the road, in a practice across the road from Shipman, and she met him in 1996. So back then, I don't know if it's the same now. Actually, I should probably check. But you would sign the other doctor's cremation forms. So for different practices. So you would, sign a little thing saying this person's going to be cremated or has been cremated, and then the other doctor would just sign to confirm, just check the details and basically say, yes, confirmed, this person has been cremated.
I'm pretty sure it is probably still the same thing.
I would say.
I mean, I do know that with what's it called, death certificates, when someone dies, another doctor that wasn't treating them usually signs it as well. So like every death certificate has to be checked by 2 doctors.
Yeah. So the cremation forms are the same. Although I must say that back in 1998, that with the death certificate wasn't the case. So only one doctor needed to sign the death certificate for when somebody dies.
That sounds problematic.
Yes, exactly. But so Linda Reynolds with the
Guys, sorry, this is how well I know her face. She's got something that she's not telling me. She's got something.
You're jumping ahead. Jumping ahead.
She's got something she's not telling me, and she's like, oh, I'm gonna keep that a secret. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry.
Mad because you keep on doing spoilers.
Sorry.
I'm just your brain is just whirring. I mean, I feel like I'm talking really fast and I'm just trying to get it all out all the time.
I love story time. Look at my little egghead in the middle of the screen.
Cutie.
Go on.
Oh my God, did you see a thing? There was something that I read the other day and it was like, it's so funny how there was just this man called Humpty Dumpty who fell off a wall and broke his head, and they couldn't put him back together, and they just assumed that he was an egg.
What?
It's so true. Who said that Humpty Dumpty was an egg?
Humpty Dumpty is a big... Humpty Dumpty is part of a medieval war thing. It's one of those big towers that they put up against a wall so that they can invade a castle.
So where did the egg come from?
It's just a children's rhyme.
Good old Linda was invited to sign these cremation forms.
Linda, that's wicked.
If you interrupt me one more time, I'm going to punch you in the face.
Okay, Linda was invited to sign the cremation forms. I'm being quiet.
For Shipman's practice, which was pretty standard.
Yeah.
But within a few months, she noticed that he had significantly more cremation forms than any other GP that she had ever met. So that meant a lot more people were dying. And she also noticed that a lot of his patients died under similar circumstances. So they were all died fully clothed, often sitting in a chair. The door was unlocked, which, I mean, elderly people don't leave their doors unlocked. And they also died often in the afternoon. And people don't often die in the afternoon, which I thought was a very weird fact. But a study in 1987 found, so it's not so long, it was only about 10 years before the investigation into Shipman started, and it showed that most people died, do you want to guess a time?
I'm going to say sometime in the night, like, because they say died in her sleep, you know. So I'm going to say something like 11 p.m. to 8 a.m.
So the study showed, you were close, and I hate you for it. It died between 2 a.m. and 8 a.m. So, okay. I mean, still in the night. Yeah, it would have been the night.
So when they get into that really deep sleep.
Exactly, yeah,
sleep.
that's what it sounds like, yeah. So whereas most of Shipman's died in the afternoon, which was just very uncommon, and fair enough if they were like here or there, but they weren't. It was most of his patients. So she reported her concern to the coroner in 1998, as was standard practice for things like that when you reported those kinds of things. Yeah. And the police opened an investigation. Like I said, this was 3 months prior to all of this, with Kathleen Grundy dying. And then a few weeks later, the police came back to her and said there was nothing sinister going on and they're closing the case. And that was that. So...
Hold on.
Go on.
What investigation did they do?
Yeah,
how much investigation can you do in 3 weeks if nobody knows about it and none of those families are aware?
Exactly. So this is the thing.
And no exhumations happened.
Bernard asked about this investigation because he found out about it. So Bernard Postle, he inquired and said, "Can I have your notes?" They gave him 3 pages of notes. 3 pages of notes into an investigation that was supposedly about quite a few people who had died suspiciously. And this included 21 names. So if you think about writing a list of 21 names, that's about a page in itself. So...
How many pages of notes have you got for this episode?
Let's see.
Mine last week, I definitely had at least 6 or 7.
Oh, yeah, easily.
So 3 pages is not a lot.
Yeah, not a lot at all. It had 21 names, all patients of Shipman's that had died in the last 6 months, and all aged around 49 to 90. So all in that kind of age range that you probably could get away with writing old age or stroke or heart attack.
What,
or
49?
I mean, some people do have heart attacks at 49, depending on their health.
Oh, no,
know?
I know. But what I mean is you can't, surely, there's a certain amount that you can't palm off as old age if you just got a load of 50-year-olds dropping dead.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But get this, with this investigation, the police didn't speak to Shipman and they didn't speak to any of the families of those that died.
So what did they do?
What did they do? But they believe that this wasn't taken seriously because he was a GP, and a GP wouldn't possibly do something like this. You know, like, would you expect your GP to be silently murdering people?
I am so obsessed with true crime. I don't trust anybody.
Trust no one. It's so true.
Trust no one. Anyone could be a serial killer.
Except for us, obviously. But that's also the kind of thing that a serial killer would say.
That's the kind of thing a serial killer would say. How do I know? This could have been, you could have played the long game.
Since I was 3 years old. I'm just waiting to get you.
Wait, she's waiting till I'm 40 so she can say it's old age.
I'm gonna get you. Yes. I just need you to make sure that you sign over your child and all of your belongings to me.
It's going to be when our podcast's successful, and then you can take it into your own name.
Yeah, and I'll just talk to myself.
And it's going to be Rosie Posey Productions.
That's
I would just like to say here,
a great name, thanks.
I'd like to say here, so it's on the record, Rosie and I had a pact that if either of us has a daughter, we have to name it after the other one. I can't have any more children. And I have a son. Rosie's firstborn daughter will be called Catherine.
It definitely won't be, because you've...
What? You're gonna punish me for my infertility.
Yeah.
Yeah. What?
Yeah. Like, okay, Leo could have been Leo Rosie.
What about if I get a fish or a dog and call it Rosie?
Definitely not.
Oh, jeez. Okay, well, I'll have a chat with the fertility doctors.
Yeah, that'd be great, thanks.
So I really wanted a baby Catherine.
So not only did he discover the same pattern as Linda Reynolds, so the dying in the afternoon, the fully clothed...
This is Postle. This is the detective.
Yes, this is Postle who discovered this. Yeah. But he also discovered that in many of the circumstances of these people that had died, Shipman was either present or had just recently left.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, what are the chances? Many of them didn't have long-term illnesses, and they often had half a cup of tea next to them, or a half-burnt-out cigarette, or in the ashtray. So he was suspicious. All the while, Shipman was still practicing as a GP. He was behaving as if nothing was amiss, and he still received, like I said, loads of respect from the community. He even had a wife, which I thought bizarre. And his wife was very quiet around all of this. He had a wife and he had 4 kids. People just nice guy, family man, just didn't think anything of it. So then 2 weeks later, the results from Kathleen Grundy came back, and it showed a lethal dose of diamorphine. Have you heard of diamorphine? Do you know what it is?
Yeah. You get it post-op.
Yeah, so it's like a pain med, but it's essentially a medical grade heroin.
Yeah. It's an opiate. and you get it after surgery, and it's really strong. And do you remember when I texted you after my operation and said, why haven't you called me? And you said to me, we've had 2 phone conversations, and I had zero recollection of them because I had taken those painkillers. Yeah. No,
those were great conversations, by the way. Great conversations.
Yeah, so that's what it is.
Yeah, very strong. And it can only be administered by doctors. So it's not as if you could just kind of like get this as a prescription.
But I'd be really surprised if like GPs can now administer that in the home without some serious paperwork.
Catherine, you've done it again.
Oh, sorry. Damn, I'm just too clever.
You're so good at this. I can't.
We need an idiot to do it with. Leo!
No, he's so clever. He's the smartest kid I know.
You don't know any children.
That's true. But he's very smart. Smarter than any other kids that I've ever met my entire life.
Yeah.
So obviously with that... No, I didn't. I grew up in London. I went to the same school as you. I did not grow up in Essex. I lived in Essex for like a year, and then I skedaddled out of there straight to university. So, obviously, with that, they opened a murder investigation. They knew for a fact that it wasn't old age that Kathleen Grundy had died of. So they arrested Harold. He was the person on the death certificate. He was the person who had visited her that afternoon. He was the person that was going to be benefiting from her will. So, arrested. And in September 1998, he was charged with the murder of Kathleen Grundy. Bail was refused and he was held on remand. The police made requests to exhume 3 more patients and then eventually 8 more, all over the next couple of weeks. There were 12 bodies exhumed altogether, and all of them were former patients. Remember that he had a lot of cremation reports, so not all of his patients were available to be exhumed, but
I wonder if he did that on purpose.
That's the thing. I think I remember somewhere that Kathleen Grundy had tried to change Kathleen Grundy's will to say that she wanted to be cremated, but the daughter had stepped in and said no.
Well done.
That she wanted to be buried. So thank goodness that they did, because otherwise they never would have found out. So 12 bodies were exhumed altogether. All were former patients, and they all started having these tests done on them. So as well as these patients that were exhumed, they also started looking into other patients that he had that had died, and kind of the circumstances around his death, their deaths. And obviously, as word's getting out that Kathleen Grundy was murdered and how Shipman was the cause, people started taking note. People started thinking about their loved ones that had died and whether
fit into the pattern?
They could have, exactly. They also could have been victims of Harold Shipman. So I'm going to tell you about a few more people. There was Ada Warburton. She died in March 1998, so around
was she part
3
of the Brent
months.
Family?
No, that was Ada Hovis.
Actually. Oh, sorry. Okay. Go on.
She was a part of everything in the area. She was a happy lady. She was, similar to Kathleen, going out and about with her friends. Police were called as soon as the death was reported by Shipman, but because it was a sudden death and the next of kin wasn't local, so the officer just accepted his answer of stroke, which was standard police protocol. Like I said, there wasn't any need for another person to sign a death certificate. Even the police were told that their protocol was that the word of the doctor was all they needed to accept a death, So his story, Shipman's story, was that Ada had called him and said that she thought that she was having a stroke. So he had gone to visit and she had just died then and there. Her niece had asked about post-mortem and she was told that it wasn't necessary. So he just completely dismissed her family members and said, no, it's not necessary. She had a stroke. That's that. And that she was buried and that was that. Marie Quinn, she died in November 1997. She was 67. She was described as gentle. She wouldn't hurt a fly. She was in really good health. Just the year before, she'd gone to Bosnia to hike. But imagine even just the travel alone would have been grueling for like a 66-year-old. That's a long journey.
Yeah, but
even that in itself,
like, you know, if we think about my mum now,
yeah, no, that's
the age
true.
difference isn't huge, and she literally climbed Snowdonia this year.
Wow.
She went trekking through India. She's going to Thailand. Like, we think that's old when we hear it, but actually when you actually relate it...
I feel like 67 today is different to 67
100%.
like 25 years ago. Yeah. So that was where I was kind of thinking with that.
Yeah. No, 100%. I agree.
So, but she was, like I said, really good health. And so again, Shipman also had gone over again because she'd called him and said that she thought she was having a stroke. Again, very similar to Ada. He had called this woman's son, Marie's son, and said, your mother has died. And so her son, who lived further away, he called her neighbour and one of her friends and said, can you go and help her with the cat while I am able to get here, because obviously my mother has died. And this was the first that her friend had heard about it. So she rushed over, and Shipman was still there at the house, and her friend was just laying dead in the kitchen. And she was so shocked. She didn't even realise. Shipman didn't even stop her from going in or anything. He just, whatever. Yeah, sure, go on in.
Life.
Honestly. And this woman, she was crying. She was obviously super upset at seeing her friend. And she said, I wish she'd called me if she wasn't feeling well so she didn't have to die alone. And Shipman consoled her and said,
oh, no.
There is nothing you could have done.
Oh, no.
Honestly, he said that he had arrived to see her taking her last breath, that she had also had a stroke, and there was no post-mortem again.
I have a question.
Go on.
From each of these people, is he attempting to, like, you know, with Grundy, Kathleen Grundy, he was trying to get the money or whatever it was in the will. Is he trying to do that with all these people?
No. Kathleen Grundy is the only one whose will was changed. Yeah.
So this is just sadistic?
So far, yeah. That's what the investigation is looking like. Yeah.
Life.
I have one more to tell you. So this is Eva, who was 71. She did actually have esophageal cancer. She was suffering with that for quite a while. The doctor came to check on her at home. She was sleeping upstairs, and so he said he'd give her something for the pain and gave her a little shot in the back of her hand. He went back downstairs with the husband. The husband was there the whole time, saw everything they were doing, were talking the entire time. Husband went downstairs, they made a coffee, having, a little bit of small talk. The doc said, I'll just go up and check on her again before I leave. And he goes upstairs and she's dead.
Oh, my life. The husband's in the house.
He essentially killed this lady in front of her husband. Her husband was present when he gave that shot in her hand.
That poor man.
They had a coffee together and had small talk in their kitchen while his wife was just dying upstairs and had been murdered in front of him.
Oh, my life.
But again, nobody thought it was suspicious. That one, more understandable maybe because she was suffering with cancer, but still, just like that, the fact that he was there, but nobody questioned it because you don't think that your GP is going to do that to you.
No.
You don't think that your GP really is going to have the audacity to inject your wife with a lethal substance right in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
It's just, people just don't even think about these things.
To do it.
Honestly. So, after 4 weeks of being charged with Grundy's death, he was charged with 3 more, all proven that they died from dimorphine. All of them had been exhumed, and they did from the forensic testing after they'd been exhumed. So, of course, like I said, many people had been cremated, so they weren't able to test everyone. But as soon as it got out, more and more people were recognising, and within a few weeks, they were investigating over 100 deaths. All of these people had died under Shipman's care.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah, all of these people were doubting how their loved ones had died simply because of they were looking at these circumstances and they were relating to them. You know, they thought that's exactly how my aunt died, or my mother, or my dad. You know, that it was always the same, always quite similar, and they just start doubting the conditions under which their loved ones died, which is awful. So by March 1999, so that was like not quite a year. It was June that the investigation started. So about 9 months after the investigation started. Oh no, but 7 months after the first exhumation, Harold had been charged with 15 murders. All of them were women. And this was the largest murder trial in British history at the time. I'm not sure if there's been a bigger one since. I can't, off the top of my head, think of anyone in Britain that's been charged with more than 15 murders.
It's I mean, in terms of a serial killer, so maybe a mass murderer, but a serial killer, no.
So at the time, they had 146 other cases with evidence that Harold had been involved in their death. But as the trial came round in October 1999, they decided that all 146 cases were far too many for a jury to rule on in one trial. So they charged him with just the 15.
That still seems like a lot to give evidence for every single one. Like, that's a lot.
Exactly.
If you're
all witnesses
you're sitting
and other
on
doctors.
the jury and having to keep track of all this, like, you're not legally or medically trained.
And because you obviously also have to say guilty, not guilty to all 15, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it is a lot. The trial was 52 days. There were 6 days of deliberation because obviously, guilty, not guilty to all of them. And he was found guilty of all 15.
Wow.
This was the biggest convicted killer in legal history. He received multiple life sentences and murdered more people than anyone else in British history. During this trial, his wife, don't know if you remember his little old wife, Primrose, testified.
Is her name Primrose?
Yeah, so sweet. But said that she remembered very little and maintained his innocence.
Well, I mean, you would. You've loved and been with this person forever, and I can understand it. But, you know, facts are facts, and yeah.
Even when he was found guilty, she still believed that he was innocent.
What a silly sausage.
So, how did he get away with this? One of I think, an important factor is the fact that we do have the NHS in England, which is... Do you want to talk about the NHS?
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So,
it's the best thing.
What do you want to know about the NHS? The NHS was founded in 1948. So there was something called the Beveridge Report. He explained about the issues that were going on in British society. And then the Health Minister, Aneurin Bevan, said that, you know, we shouldn't be worrying about finances while we are sick. And the NHS is incredible. I mean, if I think about this past year, I reckon if we did not have the NHS, 100 grand I would have spent on my healthcare.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. So it is amazing. It has the problems we have with it now are that it's the population has expanded so much, and we need so many more doctors. We need so much more money to go into it, and you know, it's hard. But the NHS is incredible. We are incredibly lucky in this country, especially when I talk to a lot of people who are in like places like America.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah.
Even just going to the dentist. My cousin says that it costs him like $500 to go to the dentist and have those checkups and x-rays and stuff, and then he can claim it back on his work insurance. And I was like, every 6 months I go to the dentist and it cost me £28, and they do my x-rays and my checkup and everything. Like, we are unbelievably lucky. So go 100%. On. Everything Rose is about to say about the NHS being a problem is just this instance, and we all love the NHS and save the NHS.
It's not that it's a problem. I just think that it was a factor in why he could get away with it. Because obviously with free healthcare, it meant that it was accessible. And so people would go to the doctor and he could check in on people at home, and he wasn't charging people for it. So people didn't question it, and people didn't say no because it was free healthcare. It was obviously if people had to pay for shots and
every time they came
for treatment, exactly, there would be receipts for everything. There would be more of a trail. People also wouldn't. How could you possibly charge someone for a shot that was going to kill them? It just wouldn't have worked. So
people would question that more. Yeah.
Exactly. Another one of the reasons was that most of them were elderly. Like I said, a lot of the people were around 49 to 90 years old. 49 not obviously being elderly, but it just meant that no one was really questioning it if he put heart attack or stroke or old age on their death certificates. They just trusted him. He was a doctor. No one would even consider that a doctor could possibly do this. Why would they? You trust them. He'd been in some people's lives for generations.
Yeah. And he's doing all the good stuff as well.
Exactly.
That woman whose baby he went to visit in the hospital, like, he's doing that alongside seeing her grandmother, who then dies of a stroke. She's not going to then doubt it because blah, 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 blah. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. And that actually happened. That woman, it was her. I mean, I wasn't going to say, this was just something that I found in my research, but it was her husband's mum that was also.
Oh my life! Yeah, I am on
murdered.
Fire today.
Some say fire. Some say you're ruining it. I'm kidding. But no, can you imagine that you're like, oh wow,
you wouldn't.
This man came, the lovely doctor came over to check on me. How nice is Harold Shipman? And then, like 10 years later, you found out that he's found out that you've murdered your mother-in-law.
Yeah,
awful, absolutely awful. And another thing was that obviously many elderly patients don't want to go to hospital. Even now, not much has changed in the fact that people don't want to go to the hospital because they fear that they're never going to come out again. They're more likely to contract more illnesses. They're going to get sick. They want to maintain their independence. And in the 1970s, many geriatric hospitals were housed separately from general hospitals. They were grim. Poor people died in hospitals. It was a privilege to be able to die at home. And so the fact that Harold Shipman was coming to your house and your grandma died at home, but for people, they were like, that was a nice way to go. She died in her favorite chair. She died like listening to the radio. For them, it was. They didn't want to question it because it was nice. Yeah, it was. They referred to it as a millionaire's death because, like I said, only poor people died in hospital. So it was quite nice.
To be able to have the doctors coming over is like a privilege.
Exactly. And this is kind of a bit of what's the word when you go off topic a little bit?
Tangent.
A little bit of a tangent. It's still obviously all relevant, but it's going back in time a little bit. Okay, so in the 1970s, so this is like 25 years before all of this is kicking off, Harold Shipman is living in an area called Todmorden, which is just on the other side of Manchester, closer to West Yorkshire. And here, a police officer who manages medical professionals and controlled drugs. So he's basically just kind of monitoring the use of these drugs and that kind of thing. He gets a call and says that all of the pharmacies in this general area were getting lots of shipments for pethidine, which is an opiate.
Pethidine. I mean, do you not give that during labour?
I could not say.
I'm going to Google that check and then I'm going to put the words over it saying yes you can or no you can't.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So all of these shipments were for Shipman, Harold Shipman, and all of the prescriptions were in patients' names, but when these people were asked about these prescriptions, none of them were familiar of or aware of them, because Shipman would always collect the prescriptions on their behalf. So he was writing
You
these.
just said shipment. That's funny. Go
There was
on.
a lot. Getting shipments for Shipman.
Shipments. And then Shipman would collect the shipments.
Shipman was collect the shipments. So he was basically writing these prescriptions for these patients and then going to the pharmacies and collecting this pethidine. So this man, this police officer, he discovered that he was befriending these elderly patients. He was able to visit them at home, using their names to create and collect these prescription prescription drugs, and then taking these drugs himself. So he was...
Oh, so he was an addict.
He was an addict to pethidine. Rearranging again. So he went to arrest him because obviously this is against the law. But they found that the practice that he had been working at had already discovered this addiction and had forced him to check him into rehab. So even though he was already in rehab, they basically found him guilty in 1976 of dishonestly obtaining drugs by means of a criminal deception, forgery of an NHS prescription, and unlawful possession of a controlled drug, pethidine. Wow. He was fired from his practice in Todmorden, fined, and told to go back to rehab. However, obviously, when this kind of investigation goes on, they have the right to strip him of his
medical license.
Doctorhood.
Active Farm isn't so stupid now, is it, with your doctorhood?
I love Grey's Anatomy as well. I definitely should have known that. So, the General Medical Council did
GMC
did their little investigation and decided he was no longer a danger to the public. And so he kept his license. He wasn't removed as a GP. He was allowed to continue practicing as a doctor. And there was no follow-up. They didn't check in on him. They didn't give him any kind of probationary period. They didn't have anything at all to check that he was still working above board after that. The policeman said directly to them, this is a wrong decision, you're making a terrible mistake, and they essentially told him to stay in his lane and said this doesn't concern you anymore, you've done your bit, now let us do ours. So back in 1976, 20 years before all of this came to light, he was found guilty of something like that. And it's not to say that everyone who's addicted to every doctor that's addicted to drugs would obviously go on to kill people and that they shouldn't be allowed to practice, but that should have been some kind of an indication. There should have been a better protocol in place.
It's not even the drugs
to watch.
Yeah, it's the forgery and it's the manipulation of elderly patients that is so concerning in that to me.
Red flag.
Yeah. That is definitely, the manipulation of elderly people in order for your own gain. That is a concern.
Yeah, exactly. And get this, just a little while after that, he was then able to get a job in Hyde, which is where this whole story started, at a group practice. He admitted his drug abuse and all of that past, and they described him as an outstanding candidate. They said he had great references, his diagnostics were great, he was forward-thinking, he went the extra mile for patients, and they didn't have a bad word to say about him. Even though he said, I was addicted to drugs, I forged prescriptions, he disclosed all of that history, they still gave him a bloody job. Go on.
Devil's advocate, though, right? Addiction
doesn't define you.
Yeah, and it is a serious problem. And then he got the help that he needed. And then, obviously, we're looking at it with hindsight of he then went on to murder so many people. But
well, yeah, you can't say no. You can't deny someone an opportunity
because
just
it is technically their illness. And the only thing that I could say is actually the thing that is worse is that he was forging the
the prescriptions and
Did you
taking
hear that?
advantage of elderly people. No,
Did
what
you
happened?
You didn't hear that cooey?
No.
Guess who's here?
Your mum.
Yeah. Yep. She'll be up any minute now. Anyway, that is the worst part in terms of professionally.
Yeah, it's the taking advantage. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Something else that just absolutely kills me is that he was even on TV explaining while being treated at home was better for your recovery, which obviously it is.
It is, yeah.
But he obviously had an ulterior motive to doing that, and that just, when you look back on things like that. So, after all of this, there were further investigations. Another doctor, another GP, was asked to review all of Harold Shipman's records to identify any suspicious deaths, any kind of pattern, if possible. And he found that he pretty much just killed people who he could give a reason for give an injection. And that was basically the pattern that they found. He would then issue a death certificate, as I said.
So vulnerable people. It's not going to be people with the big loud family who's going to kick up a fuss. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be the vulnerable, lonely, elderly.
People who aren't going to advocate for themselves and question, you know? Yeah, sucks. And as I said before, at the time, only one doctor needed to sign the death certificate. You didn't need another doctor to sign anything. So he could just get away with signing the death certificate with whatever he wanted to put on there. That man estimated that he was the cause of 236 deaths. That is roughly one patient a month. But towards the end, it was definitely more frequent than that. It didn't start off as one patient a month. He probably had fewer at the beginning. Yes, and then towards the end, it was a lot more frequently. So all of these families demanded a public inquiry. The politicians said that it wasn't necessary and it would be done privately and we didn't have to make a whole public thing about it, but they eventually won and the public inquiry was held, and his whole career was put under scrutiny. They questioned every single patient that had died under his care, and that equated to 493 deaths that they were questioning.
What?
They were questioning 493 deaths. And the public inquiry found... So the woman, I can't remember the name, I didn't write her name down for some reason. The woman who was carrying out the public inquiry, she said she wanted to look into every single person. She knew that it was important to every single family to have an answer, so they didn't have to live the rest of their lives not knowing. Wondering whether or not their loved one died of a natural cause. Exactly. She wanted to give every single one of them an answer, and she did. And she found that 215 people were murdered by Harold Shipman. And there were an additional 45 that they stated died under suspicious circumstances, but they couldn't rule either way. But 215 people overall.
And that's like the definitive number that is given, that's attributed to him.
Exactly.
Jesus.
So with that public inquiry came a very long document that covers all of the changes that she recommended to the health system in the UK.
I wonder what these could be.
Wonder what they could have said. So this was a 636-page document, so it was a huge document. And I'm obviously not going to go over the whole thing. Yeah, they need to show that
to the police who wrote 3 pages for 21 people.
Tell me about it. Oh, goodness me, that kills me.
Clearly, they never wrote a dissertation.
Oh, yeah, clearly. But 636 pages. I'm obviously not going to go over the whole thing. But the changes include audit systems. So basically making sure that drugs are accounted for at every stage of the process, that if you are taking drugs outside of your practice, that it's signed for, it's accounted for, they can follow the movement of every drug ever in anywhere it's going with whoever it's going with, as well as the regular assessments of processes. So basically just checking that everything is working on a regular basis and reviewing how we're doing things and if anything needs to change. And also the double signing of the death certificates, as we have said. Oh, wow, what a surprise. Who would have thought it?
So no, all jokes aside, that came from this case,
Harold
though.
Shipman. Yeah.
Oh,
Harold
wow.
Shipman. Yes.
Mm.
Exactly. And so that basically, this whole murder trial, this whole ordeal helped form the NHS into what it is today, into quite a solid foundation of healthcare. Because people were thinking, if he got away with this for so long, how many other doctors have been doing this? How many other doctors have really been manipulating the system?
It's precedent setting, isn't it?
Exactly. So it was clear that the current arrangements for death registration, cremation certification, and coronial investigation in England and Wales had failed, both to deter Shipman from killing his patients and to detect his crimes after they had been committed. Yeah. And that was basically the whole reason for this whole public inquiry and all of the changes that they had made.
I have a question.
Yeah?
What do they ever, like, I understand with Kathleen, I don't understand, but with Kathleen Grundy, it was obviously an attempt for financial gain. But you said that there was no doctoring of wills prior to that.
Yeah.
So why did he do this?
And that's the thing, is that if he hadn't changed that will, he might never have been caught.
Yeah.
Because that was the only reason that anyone questioned anything. That was the only reason that Kathleen Grundy's daughter...
He got sloppy.
Exactly. He got greedy. If he hadn't changed that will, then Kathleen Grundy's death would have just gone unnoticed. Nobody would have questioned it. So there was no sexual motive. He didn't care about sex. Aside from Grundy, there was no financial gain. They considered revenge and greed, but
revenge for what? Greed of what?
Revenge, exactly, for what? Many surmise that he wanted to just feel superior, and he wanted to feel in control of situations, and he simply just got the urge to kill. They did also go back to his past, and they looked into his early life. He was born the middle child, which in itself says a lot, honestly.
God, that's so hard.
Middle children.
We have suffered
a great deal.
Honestly.
I kind of understand a little bit more, the pain of being a middle child.
Oh, God. Did you hear that?
Just kidding.
She's sympathising with a serial killer of old people.
Simply just because they're the middle child, It's a hard life.
It is.
I'm just kidding. There's no excuse for murdering 215 people.
There's no excuse for murdering anyone.
Anyone ever. But
self-defense.
250. My God. Okay, yeah, fine. I'll allow that. He was born the middle child into a working class family, and they said that he was the favourite child of his mother, Vera. She instilled in him an early sense of superiority. So he idolised her. And this impacted a lot of his later relationships as well, that obviously he got married and had a nice little wife and family. Primrose, good old Primrose. But he just idolised his mother at the end of the day, and it was almost like no one ever could live up to him. And he was quite isolated in his adolescence. He had very few friends.
Do you think Leo feels that way about me?
Definitely not.
I hope he does.
He might idolise me. Do you want him to idolise you? Surely not.
Not really, no. Not like this.
Not
Jesus
like that. Christ. Yeah. Definitely not. No, I think he thinks very highly of you. He does.
When he was 3, he told me that he said to me, we were sitting in the theatre, and he said to me, "Mummy, did you know that girls can marry girls and boys can marry boys?" And I said, "Yes, baby, you can marry whoever you want as long as they're kind to you." "Okay, I'm going to marry you then, so I never have to leave the house." I was like, whoa.
Okay, there are some exceptions.
There are some rules and exceptions to this. Yeah. I just didn't think we'd have to go into that so much.
Not at 3 years old.
No.
But when he was a teen, his mother was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, and he willingly oversaw her care and her decline. They said they reported that he was fascinated by the positive effect of morphine on her suffering. So that might have almost triggered something,
Yeah,
you
but
know?
I get that when somebody is ill, you know.
Yeah,
I
but
get
fascinated.
Yeah, but okay, right. Somebody's in pain, like excruciating pain, and you give them something that can alleviate that. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
alleviate that. And there is kind of an element of fascination of like how bad it is and what this thing can do for you. I'm not saying I personally would, but I can understand why somebody
Yeah.
would. I think to me that's more just a case of that's him learning.
So it was because of that he was adamant that he was going to become a doctor, and he went to medical school soon after she died. And it was soon after that, while he was in medical school, that he met Primrose and they got married.
He could have had a lovely life.
He could have had. But we will never know the real reason why, because Shipman committed suicide in prison in 2004. And so,
what a coward.
What coward. But the whole time, even up to 2004 when he committed suicide, his wife maintained his innocence and believed that he didn't do anything wrong.
I feel bad for her.
I do as well. I
but
really,
wake
really
up,
do.
Primrose. Wake up.
Yeah.
Wake up and smell the primroses. Well, that was fun. I enjoyed that one, baby. Thank you. And I think, like there's a lot of things there that I recognise today.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know, in the medical system that have come about when I go into hospital? Sometimes it can take so long for me to get controlled drugs because they have to be signed out of a special cupboard and there's a specific key for it. It's not as simple as other medication that can just be prescribed. And you know, so exactly. I can see a lot of things there. It's me next week.
Woo! What are you,
we're recording tomorrow. We're recording tomorrow. Yeah, because next week is my birthday. So thank you so much, guys, for whoever our 30 people are who listened to our first episode. Yay. We cannot explain to you that it actually means the world to us.
It really does, because we're unemployed. I'm unemployed. You can't work.
No.
Yeah,
So it means everything to us. I've had so many amazing conversations with people on Threads and Instagram, and we're getting more suggestions in. A woman actually suggested topics to me, which brings me joy. So thank you so much. Please go and follow us on everything. Rosie is in charge of our TikTok, our Instagram, and it's 26tolife_pod on TikTok and Instagram, and it's 26tolifepod on YouTube and Spotify. So please subscribe, say nice things about us, send it to somebody, and if you have nothing nice to say, then get a therapist.